come before you as your children in gratitude. And Father, you've heard all of these requests. We have several in our class, Lord, that are ill with COVID, RSV, that need your healing hand upon them. And we have people who have lost loved ones to COVID. We have friends, Lord, who are in need of your healing hand. And then we come to you in praise because of Clay's good report. Lord, this young man, a teen who has received a heart transplant. We usually think of that happening, or at least I do, I guess, to older people. But here's a young man still in his teens, and he has a new heart. And so, Father, with your healing mercies upon him, his life takes on new meaning for him, Lord. And so we thank you for that. We thank you for doctors who can do that kind of thing, Father, and for nurses and others who treat those people after their surgeries. And Lord, I pray for our doctors and nurses in this COVID outbreak. I pray you'd give them strength, Lord. You listen to them talk and they're very tired and they're discouraged. And so I just pray you would be their strength, be their encouragement, Lord. Help them to feel your presence. Help them to feel the prayers that go up for them every day. And Lord, I pray for John Paul as he comes to bring the lesson to us this morning, one that we might not even want to hear him talk about, but it's a reality of life. And so I pray you'd be with him, Father, and I pray you'd open our hearts to your word. And we just want to give you thanks, Lord, because of who you are. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Okay. After wearing out my finger, hopefully. Well, that's the first slide anyway. The title for the lesson, and we're still concluding Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 9. We'll be looking at the first 10 verses, and I've already been told that they were looking forward to how I would approach this lesson, since it's a challenge. If you haven't read it, it's a challenge type thing. But before we do that, because the title of the lesson was Facing Death, I thought I might vary just a little bit right at the beginning and just share with you. Back on the back is one page sheet of paper. Now, if you haven't gotten one, let me urge you to pick up one, at least one per family. And what I did was this. In fact, I called Ron White, who is the main caretaker or director of Magnolia Funeral Home. And I said, Ron, we're talking about death in our Sunday school class from Ecclesiastes, and can you give me a short form that gives some information? Now, what I really was looking for was a definition of what a will was, what power of attorneys was, and all that sort of stuff. That's not what I found, but what I found I thought was extremely helpful. And so if you've gone through death, and I'm sure all of you have, but if you've gone through death as an adult, you understand that there are a lot of things that you have to search for the party that's gone. And so this is some it's not an inclusive list at all, but it is some things that you might want to have knowledge of where these things are when you prepare somebody else for your homegoing. And it's things like where your will is, where your letter of instructions, meaning if you've got some wishes for what happens to your funeral, if you got some wishing about where you get buried, all that sort of stuff, letter of instruction, birth certificates, marriage instructor, divorce papers, separation papers, adoption papers, social security number. All of those are things that you need, particularly social security numbers. You need to know where all of that kind of stuff is. And then military records and names and addresses of your doctors and all that sort of stuff. So the list is very exclusive, continues other kind of things. And then I pull from my file, and by the way, I haven't done any of this. So I'm talking to me to do this sort of stuff. But I found this back in my file. We were at a funeral in Rusk, Texas, where Judy and I were both raised at Wallace Thompson Funeral Home. And they had available a family record guide. And this one does lots of things for it. It first gives your vital certificates, the name, your birthday, all that sort of stuff, brothers and sisters, father's name, maiden name for your mom, all those kind of things that are needed at the time when you try to start writing something about somebody. So it does a great job about that, gives your doctor's name and all that sort of stuff. And then it gives personal history. What, you know, we tend to forget what our friends who've gone on did in their life. And so it gives a quick summary of that. And it gives all that stuff, the military time, of course, and all that sort of stuff. And if you want your obituary listed in a funeral home, which one of those? And then back on the back, it has a list for immediate family. So you might want to think who's still alive and who's gone and all that kind of stuff about them. And then a local emergency. And then I had one other. Well, this one came from a couple of life insurance companies, Boston Insurance Company and Lincoln Heritage Life Insurance Company, and it's a plan to achieve peace of mind. Now, I say this because I picked up one from a funeral home, picked up one from an insurance company. You can find these anywhere. And I would suggest you find something. This one does a little different, and it goes through the persons to notify, the documents you'll need, your thoughts of how you're approaching your end and what your thought would be, even all that sort of stuff. I was at the funeral of someone not long ago, and the pastor said something like this. He said, we pass out a sheet of paper if people want to do it, and they fill it out and they send it back to the church, and he has a file. And that file has to do with their last wishes. And it has to do with the songs that you want to sing, you know, what favorite scriptures you want to use, all those kinds of things that are helpful to the pastor as he's trying to work those sort of things, where your Bible is, all that sort of stuff. Well, all of that is said to this because is the first paragraph up there says, if Jesus tarries his coming, we're all going to be in a casket somewhere or going to be no longer alive, maybe a better way. And we need to make it easier on the people we'll leave behind. I served an executor for my father, and we weren't living together. Judy and I were already married, and we were two separate, and he was reasonably organized. He had a lot of stuff already done for us, but it was still a chore to find out He had some property and he had sold it. And I didn't have all the names of the people he had sold it to and all that sort of stuff. So it took a little while to get it all back. But then the final thing, we need to make our request known, whatever we want done at that point. So I'm saying that not to be negative at all. It's just a real factor of life. And so if you haven't spent time thinking about it, it's wise to just put those kind of things. Judy wants me to call the kids in and say, look, this is where our investment is, this is where our saving account is, this is where, and just give people some sort of insight on. I think that's all probably. Well, enough of that. So we're going to go now to the lesson. As I said, the title was Facing Death. Life, and the longer we live, in my opinion, the longer we live, the reality of death becomes more and more real. We've seen lots of people go. I no longer have a living mother or father or grandparents. I don't have any of that. I now have a living brother or sister. When we get closer, we begin to start that. And we come to a point in which we realize that we have the fact that we're alive is a privilege. It's really a gift from God. We know that life is brief, but we also know that death is certain. Life as we know it always will contain challenges. And so the urge is that we use our time while we're still here. And it's not negative, but it's that. And then this quote that I put down from one commentator. He said, this chapter is the most pessimistic of all Solomon's writings. So as we're tackling these first 10 verses of chapter 9, understand that there's a lot of reality here, but it's kind of negative. I'll try to pull some positive stuff as we go through that. Verses 1 through 3. We'll break these apart in just a minute. They appeared to me to be very distinct, meaning I think verse 1 will stand alone, verse 2 will stand alone, verse 3 will stand alone. We'll try to get to those broken apart in just a minute.
So I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise in what they do are in God's hands. But no man knows whether love or hate awaits him. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. As it is with the good man, so with the sinner. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of men, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead.
As I said, I thought these first 3 verses need to stand alone. And so I put the verse first right at the top of your screen. So I reflected on this and conclude that that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands. We'll point that out in just a minute. And no man knows whether love or hate awaits them. The first thing I looked at was the word reflected. I think this means that Solomon or whoever wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, we use Solomon as a generic word in this case. Somebody had spent some thought on life in general. He had looked at all kinds of things going on in life, and he came to some conclusions after meditating on it. Now, I love that because he said, I just didn't look and it just whatever popped in my mind. I thought it through. I thought about what I saw and what it meant. And so he's looking at life in general, everything that he's got. And then it says that the righteous are those whose heads, shall we say, screwed on straight. The righteous and the wise, those that are thinking about life and its meaning, that they realize that there is a creator God and he's in charge. Other people don't give a thought at all to the fact that there's a creator God and he's personal. But those who are, as it says, righteous and wise, let me just interpret that, those who are thinking straight say there is a creator and he's in charge of us wherever we are. And then it says, no man knows whether love or hate awaits him. The New Living uses the phrase, don't know whether or not they'll be in God's favor or not. Let me just reinterpret that. Let me just say, not love or hate. We're going to have a whole vast of experiences as we come through life. And some of them are going to be pleasant, and some of them are not going to be pleasant. And Brother Ed hit that pretty hard. That's just part of life. We just don't have a bed of roses, that, as they used to say. We don't know what it's going to have. And sometimes, more times than not, we wonder where is God's justice. Maybe even wonder where God is himself. We see things happening and we wonder why and why and why. When we get to John 16, Jesus said this. He said, you will have suffering in this world. Jesus, right before the cross. You will have suffering in this world, but be courageous. I have conquered the world. I have overcome, the old King James said, the world. The word God, as Mark made very clear to us when the Sunday he covered for me, the word God is Elohim, which is the creator God. But it's not Yahweh. It's not the Israel's God. It's not the personal God. But it is a God that has everything in his hand. And he says, in my opinion, that without a personal relationship with this God, you're lost. So I think he's saying life is meaningless without that. Verse 2 goes on to mention all share a common destiny. Righteous, the wicked, good, the bad, the clean, the unclean, those who take oaths and those who are afraid to take them. So he's saying in the second part, I put it conclusion, he's saying that death is a common thing for everybody. Now, whether you are an Asian or whether you're in Afghanistan or whether you're a Muslim or whether you're a Baptist, everybody's got one common trait, and that is we're eventually, should God tarry his coming, that we're going to face death. And Hebrews 9:27 says, it is appointed for people to die once, and after that, the judgment. So he's saying that, and then he says, I think he's saying that it doesn't matter where you live, how you've been raised, whether you were raised in a good home or a bad home, doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. All of us, clean or unclean. I love that phrase. He said, oath takers are not oath takers. Whether or not you're religious and say, I'm doing what God wants me to do, and those that refuse to do what God's telling me to do. I think good oath takers are, he's saying all of them have one thing in common, and that is death. Verse 3 takes a little different approach. And in verse 3, he says, this is evil in everything. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of man, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterwards they join the death. He's saying that regardless of how you live your life, that there is that pressure to do bad. You don't have to teach kids how to lie. They just naturally do it. Did you get the cookie? No, ma'am. Cookie's gone. You were the only one here. No, ma'am, I didn't get the cookies. Yeah, we all fight that tendency to say we're okay, and if we do something, it's okay. And we're all at that point. The conclusion, there's evil everywhere. It goes back to that phrase, under the sun. It's a common phrase throughout Ecclesiastes. And all of them, all men have evil in their hearts. We think we're pretty good, and then all of a sudden, bam, our minds just go haywire. And you probably can agree to that. I know I can't. But the New Living even takes this one further. It says that all men live without hope unless we come to a realization that Jesus came for us. All the people are going to die. Like I said before, all of us should prepare. The first step in living is to be prepared for death. I wrote that, and then I erased it. And then I wrote that, and then I erased it. And I wrote it, and then I erased it. I finally just said, it probably needs to be in there. One thing about life is it's going to end. And we need to be realistic about that. And another thing, when we fight that tendency to do evil, we can say, when death comes, I won't have that tendency anymore. It's all gone. I won't have to worry about that anymore. Romans 10:9-10 says, if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is in believing that your heart that you are made right with God, and if you openly declare your faith, you are saved. Two other verses I thought were appropriate for this. The first one's from Ephesians. God saved you by his grace when you believed. You can't take credit for this. With the fact that we're inundated with evil since Adam sinned, we can't do it. But we can't take that credit for our salvation either. It's a gift of God. Salvation is not a reward. Not a reward. We can't work our way to heaven. None of us can boast. And Jeremiah says, the human heart is most deceitful of all things, desperately wicked. And then he asks the question, do you really know how bad you are? Maybe not. Verses 4-6.
Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even the memory of them is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have part in anything that happens under the sun.
I changed the color and underlined the word hope because every time I see the word hope, my mind immediately switches back to 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. And it says, of the things that will remain, faith, hope, and love. Love is the best one. But hope is in there. And I wanted to remind you of that. But then at the end of that, it said a phrase, even a live dog is better than a dead lion. Now, I guess all of you except one or two were here when communism was a real threat for the United States. And I remember people building the bomb shelters and all that kind of stuff during that period of time. We were so afraid. And there was a phrase that was said then. Most of the time it was a negative phrase. It said, better red than dead. You may remember that. Is living under communism better than death in America? And we use that both positive and negative. And we use that as he's saying, if you're alive, there's some hope. But if you're dead, there's no hope. Hope is the ground that we ground our lives to. It's to feel secure. It implies that earthly life can't be enjoyed in retrospect. Now, that I just put that down there. But the more I thought about it, the more real it became. When you're gone, what has happened here won't matter anymore. And you can't go back and change. I've watched some TV series that every once in a while a person, and they were imagination of and he'd take a life and flip him back 3 or 4 years to be able to change something, the way he acted, and to be able to modify that. That's not possible. We will not have any chance to redo what we're going. And it's that concept of live, we better do something while we're alive, because it's death. It doesn't matter whether we're a lion or a kitty cat. We're going to be gone. Living know this thing from sure, they're going to die, but if there's a future report, and there is, if we believe in Jesus, if there's a future reward, it's got to be obtained now, not later. We'll all be back forgotten like past generations. Think back in your life. Can you remember the names of your grandmother and grandfather? Can you remember their father and their mother's names, both sets of them? Go back another generation. Do you remember that generation? There'd be 4 sets of them now. Mother, father, mother, father, mother, father, mother, father. Life has a way of erasing the slate. We think we're important, but in reality, when we're gone, life will continue. And it's not that. And it includes 3 words: love, hate, and jealousy. Now, if I'd have stopped right after love and hate. But he said, wait a minute, jealousy is really powerful emotion. And he said, what goes away is both love and hate, but those internal feelings that we don't like somebody, the jealousy is also there. Life as we know it won't be any more. Life will continue. The implication of that, I think Solomon would say to us, is realize that your life, the world doesn't revolve around you. That when you go, life is going to go on just like normal. Well, not quite the same, but it'll be. Thus, don't live carrying things that embetter us, and live a life with no regrets. And I think woven through this passage is that passage. Brother Ed said it this morning, but we need to make sure that the slate is clean as we can make it. We'll make an effort to be forgiven, make an effort. If we're forgiven, that's great, but it takes the responsibility off of us to us. Philippians 1:21, Paul says toward the end of his life, for me, living is living for Christ, but dying, I got some good stuff in store. John 14, this is Jesus, his last few moments with his disciples. John 14, don't let your heart be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's house. I'm old enough to be brought up with King James, and I still love, in my Father's house are many mansions. And I love that. I still think about that. And if it not were so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. When everything is ready, I will come and get you. A positive thing for Christians.
Go, eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart. For it is now that God favors what you do. Always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the grave where you are going, there's neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom.
Kind of made a switch here. Very positive at this passage. Verse 7 says, go. It's easy to read that passage without paying attention to what it. That word go is the only imperative in this whole section. Meaning he's saying, this is a command. Pay attention, go, do specifically something, go. Eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it's now that God favors what you do. The go is the imperative, but it also contains contentment and joy. Reason for being contented on earth. Well, I just thought, in addition to what was on the screen, I think there's some things that we need to pay attention to. First of all, that God accepts us just like we are. Aren't you glad that God accepts you just like it? That he didn't only let's just put it, he didn't only bless Aggies, but he also blessed Longhorns. Aren't you glad that he didn't put an exclusion for that God so loved the world? Aren't you glad that he put, yeah, God accepts us, and we don't have to struggle to meet him. Not only that, and this is probably the thing that I try to get across to grandkids. Use your life purposefully. You're going to have an impact on some people, not the whole world probably, but you're going to have an impact on some people. Make sure that impact you make is positive and that life is with you. All blessings come from God, and be joyful. I read regularly that the happiest people on earth don't have anything like we do. They're just grateful the fact that I get little beans and rice today. That's enough. I have a place to put my head when I lay down. The happiest people on earth don't have what we have. And I think it's a challenge to us to be thankful for everything. And then it says, eat your food with gladness. Breaking of bread is a sign of intimate fellowship. There's a choice that we all make to accept people as they are and to put them in our circle of friends. It's a choice. Acts 10:15, but the voice called, this is for Peter, do not call something unclean if God has called it clean. 1 Corinthians 13, whatever you eat or drink, do it for the glory of God. If you got steak, if you got hamburger, if you don't have meat, whatever it is, do. Verse 13 of chapter 14 of Revelations, I heard a voice from heaven said, write this down. Blessed are those who die in the Lord, for from now on, blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they are blessed indeed, for they will rest from their hard work, and their good works will follow them. That's in eternity. It doesn't happen here necessarily. Verse 8, I love this phrase. I almost said, I'm going to put that up there and then not say anything about it. Just let people mull about what it really means. It says, always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil. Now, put that in our context. Always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil.
New Living says, wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne.
I think fine clothes and splash cologne is pretty well. I love it when I see somebody that's so happy, it just comes out of them. They dance in the rain, so to speak. It doesn't matter. Judy has a way of inviting people over to the house, and sometimes we go back in the deepest cabinet and find the good china and put it out. And I'm so glad we do, because the dishes are dishes. The food is food. Food put on china are just plain everyday, what did they call it? Just plain stuff. It doesn't matter. You're going to eat it anyway, but sometimes we need to share fullness. Fullness. I remember the story of Mephibosheth, if I said that anywhere close. The lame heir of King Saul. And David brought him into the king and had him fit at the table. Here was this young man that couldn't walk, couldn't care for himself, now got to sit at the table. You can imagine what was going through his mind. He said, wherever you find clothed in white, every once in a while, just wear your party dress. Every once in a while, just wear something that just makes you look nice. Why? Because you love to wear orange, then wear orange. If you love to wear maroon, wear maroon. If you love yellow flowers on your dress, wear yellow flowers. Don't leave your party dress in the closet. Eat on your best chinas and don't leave them on the shelf. You know, we've got more sets of dishes than anybody ought to have allowed. And I look at my kids, they're adults with their own family, and I say, where are those dishes gonna go? Probably not going to one of my kids. So they're gonna wind up in SOS or some other place. And I'm saying that use what God has given you and enjoy life. Make a habit of doing that. Look for things to be happy and excited about. It's amazing. Judy's far more gardener than I am. And she looks outside and she can name the flowers that are in the yard. To me, they're all flowers or maybe roses. I don't know. But she notices when one of them blooms. I don't notice them at all. I got some lovely pictures from Mamie on the computer, not looking. She just said, the bird is sitting in the windowsill. And we said, so? She doesn't say so. She said, wow, he's here just to bring me joy, just a moment. Find pleasure in the routine and the more monotonous. I love to mow. Some people think I'm crazy, but I love to make the yard look nice, and that makes me happy when I have mowed and I walk back across the yard and I find that I missed a slip. I want to go back, get the mower back out and take care of it. And it says, enjoy your wife whom you love the days of your meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. All your days are meaningless. And I think Judy and I have a great relationship, and our love is stronger now than it was before. And but there is something about whether it's a close friend or it's a brother or a sister or wherever, there's something about closeness, personal closeness, that just makes life joyful. Ben Blackman and I share a cup of coffee a couple of times a week. Ben's different from me. I'm different from Ben. We think about two different kinds of things. But in the porch, it's just a joy to be in the porch with Ben. It's just a joy to be. Well, let me suggest you find somebody to enjoy life with. If it's your mate, be blessed and continue to do that. Verse 10. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. For in the grave, where you're going, there's neither working or planning or knowledge or wisdom. Now, he says a powerful phrase right at the beginning. He says, where you're going. Don't miss an opportunity to enjoy being alive. Calvin loves to play 42. I do too. When we play 42, that's all there is. There's nothing but 42. Now, I try to speak nicely to the people playing against me and the people, but it's just 42. I enjoy 42. I'm going to get a kick out of the next time I get a chance to play 42. You may say I'm crazy, but maybe you've got to play spades or canasta or something. That find joy in just being alive. I love to. Judy taught me this. Not very well, but she's made it clear. When you leave the bedroom, put the bed straight. Make the bed. And it took me a while to realize what it made a difference to her when she walked in the room and saw it in order. I want to go on. Put an effort into each and every task we have to do. I love to figure out how to do things better and easier and quicker. Even when I mow a different way every time, just because I want to try a different kind of thing. And do it with all your might and your strength. After death, none of the things that we enjoy today, except praising God, is going to exist. None of the things. So while we're here, let's make an effort to enjoy the things that we've got. And always be thankful that Christ came and provided salvation and an eternity. Well, just a couple of points. I'm not even sure they related to the message or the lesson. Take the breath of life as a pleasure, as the privilege that it is. Wherever we are. I saw Sharon Smith this morning, had a chance to hug her before Sunday school, before church. She's paying the price of loving her husband because she pays it every day and every hour of every day. But she wouldn't trade that life for anything in the world. Encourage first yourself. Get out of the dumps. Find joy and then pass it on. Be constantly thankful for the cross and the gift of salvation. And finally, don't live this life with unresolved conflicts. Too short not to live it.